Good morning, everyone. Just wanted to say hello, starting a little bit early on today's live stream to make sure that everything is working on Facebook. Hope everyone is having a beautiful day so far. It is Monday, October 7th, and Citizens of the Spark is well funded. We are on our way onward and upward, and today we're going to introduce you to the designer of Citizens of the Spark, Philip duBarry, who is with us here live, and I'm going to welcome you to the stage. Hello, Philip. How are you today?
Hey, doing well. How are you?
So good, thank you. Just having a lot of fun with this campaign. I hope you're very excited. We're all very excited to see your game coming to life.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Pretty cool to watch. I appreciate all the funding that we've seen so far. So that's neat.
Yeah, I actually was just playing it with some friends this weekend again. Some of them were new to it and some of them were not. It was so gratifying. One of them just started playing right away. We didn't really fill him in on how the game worked. We just kind of started playing with him and he flowed right into it. It's so easy to teach. Everyone kind of grabs onto it really early. And I think we ended up playing 3-4 rounds. I brought other games, I did, but we just kept playing that all night. So it's so much fun to play it when it feels so different every time. So you've created an awesome game, and we're very excited about it.
Thank you.
Well, so I have a couple of questions that I wanted to run past you. Of course, as is usual, we're going to start with some really hard hitters, including pineapple on pizza. Does it belong?
It can be tolerated.
You're one of those.
Not my first choice, but I don't. I will eat it. I will eat it.
Very well. And how about licorice? Black licorice specifically.
Again, I have been known. I did go through a stage back in the day of I would take the black jelly beans, and sometimes it would just hit, and I would be in a mood, and I would eat those. So yeah.
Awesome.
Again, not quite so much these days, but there was a phase of it. Yeah.
It's just a phase, everyone. Okay, it was just a phase. We won't judge you too hard on that, but
okay.
So speaking of judge and judges, we have this awesome game, Citizens of the Spark, and it's filled with fantastic citizens like the judge, the executioner, but also the diplomat, and what else do we have? What are some of your favorite citizens in this game?
Well, I was kind of looking back through one of them of course, all of the art is just amazing, and I was just blown away by how it all turned out. I remember when Keith first sent me like just some sketches or whatever, and I was just flipping through all the different ones. I couldn't believe how nice it was. There's this one called the Pupil that's really cool. It's kind of like a chameleon, but I like it's sort of like his action too, because he doesn't work like the other ones. You actually just sort of automatically convert him and put him into another stack. So he's kind of like a wild card. So I like that one. I actually do like that judge card that you mentioned as well. I like that rooster. He's cool.
Yeah, I honestly love that art with him balancing the scales and the rooster. By the way, we have a new creature citizen who has joined. Sorry about that, everyone. We'll just hide him. It's fine. He's that's probably easier. Hope you don't mind. If I throw him out, he'll just make noise. So, actually, I was just playing with the Pupil. We were laughing about it. So it's an illustration of a chameleon, right? And it's got the very chameleon-esque eye kind of looking at you. And we were joking about the pupil and the pupils and how appropriate all of these animal selections were because of that function that the chameleon does something different. It changes based on what citizen you assign it as the pupil of, right? It's always a converted citizen that is being led by a different type of citizen, and that's so chameleon-esque that it changes as it goes. And I think the team, and I'm sure you probably had some input on this, really worked hard at making those choices appropriate and interesting, and a little bit tongue-in-cheek where possible. I thought they
did a good job on that.
The lion tyrant is very apropos. But there is kind of a lot of history behind, pun a little bit intended, about how this game came to be the current iteration that it is, filled with all these ridiculous, adorable creatures and interesting animals that are kind of being part of the city. So can you tell me a little bit about where this game started and what form it originally took and how it's changed for you over time?
Sure. Well, it kind of started, and later on, maybe people read some of my designer diary that I put together, which I go into a little bit more detail about some of this. But I started playing a game called Guildhall back in 2012, something like that. That's when it came out. I can't remember exactly when I got it, probably not right away. But I was playing it, and it was really neat where you have like these sets of cards that you're collecting, and then the goal is to like get rid of them. That's how you score your victory points, and you also get like this special action or something. And I think you get like sort of a power while you have those cards, but then when you get rid of them, your power goes away. And so it's kind of balancing, you know, how many to have and when to get rid of them and how to get the points, but how to keep your powers. So I thought that was really fun. It wasn't exactly the game I wanted. There was some things that I didn't appreciate about it, like I thought could be better. And, you know, that went to the back of my mind for a while. And then I think it was about 2015 or something like that. I decided to try to put together something that was kind of like that, but also exploring some other things and had maybe way more cards than they did. And so that's when the first iteration came out. And the other thing I was kind of exploring, which is not part of Guildhall, is the idea of selecting multiple things that are kind of hooked together. So that's what I originally started out with. You're choosing out of groups of 2 cards, and you get both of the cards. And so it was, I always kind of find that interesting in games where it's like you put together 2 different things and you have to take both, but you can figure out which is the best combination. That's just kind of the player I am. I just like to see what's going to happen and see that, you know, when cards come out and figure out like, oh, okay, this one and this one. And I just think that's cool. So I wanted to do that. And eventually it got into like 3 card sets. And so the first version, I don't know, do we want to show that
Yeah,
slide?
Sure.
Okay.
So we got some...
the first version was called Citizens, and it was a Roman Empire theme. I'm kind of a history buff, so I like learning about history and things like that, and watching documentaries and stuff. And so I'm really interested about the Roman Empire. And
how often do you think about the Roman Empire?
Right. Probably way too often.
Yeah, honestly, me too. I'm not even a huge history buff, so it's appropriate. I think about the Roman Empire all the time. Yeah.
Well, you know, it's surprisingly relevant, I think, sometimes.
Consistently, yeah.
But it also it's a very interesting backdrop for a lot of games. There's a lot of political machinations and a lot of you know, different city building type things going on, and road construction and empire building and armies and fighting and all kinds of stuff.
Oops, sorry.
And so so this is so I even to this day, no matter what new game I'm making, I'm always tempted to start in the Roman Empire. And like, I don't always do that, but sometimes I do that. So I mean, the game definitely started with mechanics, but like, you know, Rome fits pretty well. So it's a little vanilla now. And so I can understand why people are like, you know, maybe we don't want this theme, but you know, it's still fun. But you can see lots of games in the Roman Empire. So anyway, you can see how the cards, like this is one of the very first cards. And it's very similar to how the game is now. There's like 3 different levels of the card, depending on how many of them you have in your city. Mm-hmm. Well, the one thing that I think changed the most was in the original game, it had these other cards called building cards, and they sort of had some different icons and things on them. Actually, I think that's where the icons all were, on the building cards. So in 2015, I made this one. I pitched it to a few different publishers, and I got some interest from Nevermore Games, which they don't exactly exist anymore. I think they're a part of Greater Than Games now, but so we worked on it quite a bit back in the day, but just sort of worked out with their company. They had a couple of different directions they were going, and so they were going to kind of put this on the back burner, and then they end up getting acquired, and it just never did happen. But you know, we did a lot of interesting work on it. And so part of that work, we can go to the next slide, I guess.
Oh, sure.
The game then became Comrades, because we were thinking, I think their game that they had a game called Chicken Caesar, which was kind of big on Kickstarter back in the day, and that was in the Roman Empire. And so they thought, well, we don't want to have all our games being in the Roman Empire, so we were trying to throw around different ideas about what it could be. And so somehow we came up with this idea of like using this old communist political posters and stuff, and propaganda posters from the 30s and 40s and 50s, I guess. So we kind of rethemed everything about that. We took all the building cards out of the deck and put them onto the side, so they were their own kind of deck, which you always had access to, but you could only get one of those. And it was nice. It worked pretty well. It was better than having them mixed in. And then so we worked on that for a while, but like I said, we couldn't figure out how to get it on the schedule for them, and it just didn't make sense for their company, or the timing was wrong or something. So anyway, basically, at that point, it was about 2018 when we kind of quit messing with it, and it just went on my little list of games that I need to either fix or abandon. Like, I think that's what I have written on my little page: fix or abandon. And there's a list of games there, and this one went right on there. And I think it stayed on there for like 4 years or something.
Wow. Out of curiosity, how many games do you feel like are generally on that list at any given time for you?
Oh, usually, somewhere between 6, 7, 8, something like that.
Oh, wow. So
now, some
games constantly designing?
Yeah, there's kind of a list. There's different categories. Ones I'm got to work on, ones that are under contract, and ones that are going to be pitching, and so there's different ones. So I'm always kind of like shuffling through, and and I'm rewriting this list all the time. And so a lot of these games that are in this category just get dropped off the list, and I never think about them again until I clean out my drawers or something like that. And I'm like, oh, I remember this game. But this one was kind of hanging on the list. Like, I would like to I thought it was cool. I thought it was fun. So we'll show the last slide. In 2022, I think I decided I was going to go back and make that game again. Forget the Soviet junk. I'm going to go back to the Roman Empire. And the biggest thing I figured out at this point was get rid of the building cards. The building cards never worked exactly right. That was the thing that was kind of making it just be a little bit weird. And so I put the icons right on the cards. And that was a really magic moment when that happened. And the game just worked so much better. And everything was really firing really well. So I started pitching this one, and I ended up pitching it to Keith at Thunderworks, and he was very enthusiastic right from the beginning. And so they kind of fast tracked it in pretty well. I mean, it was still, it took a year and a half or so, but that's, in my world, that's really fast. And so it was great.
Yeah, we're not much for dragging our feet around here. Everything moves pretty quickly, but that's fast. So this has been in the works effectively since 2015. Did you say?
Yeah, that's pretty much true.
That's amazing. So those icons were originally associated with buildings that your citizens were constructing then, or were they? Yeah.
You're adding kind of buildings to your city. It was actually like kind of made a little street, and then your citizens were kind of underneath there. So it's sort of like a separate part of your tableau, I guess, but turns out really didn't need that at all.
Well, it works really, really smoothly now. I absolutely love the way that everything just works. Everything is very self-explanatory. Everything just is so varied every time. I know all of the citizens, right? I mean, clearly, all the citizens, what they do, the ways they interact with one another. But every time you play the game, it really does feel very fresh and like you're figuring out something between a game of chicken with the other players who have the same citizens, and a little bit of touch of luck and decision making between picking what you want from the assembly. and figuring out how and when you can make things pop off the best for yourself. It's just so satisfying. I'm very pleased that it didn't stay for long in that folder of forget about it or fix it, because it's just an absolute blast.
Yep, I'm glad it's not in there anymore. Also,
yes, we're very excited to see it happening. We actually we were just talking about the other day some of the things that we are extra excited about adding. We've got I think I was the first one maybe to play a full game on the new playmat.
Oh, okay, yeah, right, yeah,
in person yet.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, with the solo side over here.
Mm-hmm.
So we're pretty pleased with that. It's a really nice, it's a good quality playmat.
Right.
It
looks really good.
Yeah, but all those physical components. I want, like, when you were originally making it as a Roman Empire game, what kind of were there, like, resources? What was the victory condition?
It was.
I'm thinking those fancy sparks we have, and
yeah, I think I was just using little poker chips, or little like those little mini ones. So I think they were just all like little yellow. They look like money, kind of, but I was calling it glory, I think.
Glory. Okay, that's what I was wondering. Was it money, or was it some other form? Okay, that makes sense. So it is
kind of look like money.
You know, it's like in Dawn of Ulos, we have the favor. You know, the favor of the gods, the glory of the Roman Empire. That makes total sense. Yeah. So, do you mentioned that you're big into history and that a lot of your games kind of have a historical start to them. Is there kind of a point in your life where you feel like you kind of fell into the history buff moment, or?
Well, I mean, you know, my dad has always been into kind of like World War II history, and, you know, watching all the old movies and stuff. I mean, that's what we did a lot of times on the weekends and stuff, or we would play Axis and Allies or something, or we would go to a lot of museums. It's pretty cool because I actually earlier this year I had another game come out called Order of the Day Normandy. And it's about D-Day, and I sort of dedicated that to my dad because he's really the one that inspired that kind of love for history and for World War II, and so I was pleased that was able to happen. But, you know, I've always been into like ancient time as well, like the Romans, but also Egyptians and Greeks, and I don't know, it's just all very fascinating to me. And I think maybe, you know, I don't know if that was movies or board games or books. I think maybe now that I'm thinking about it, maybe my grandparents had some cool books about different civilizations and history that I used to look at when I was staying with them sometimes. And we had encyclopedias back in the day. I mean, I'm total Gen X, so you know how it is. Before the days before the internet or whatever, it's like you had these, you know, books that had these amazing pictures in it that, you know, that was your access to that kind of stuff. And I just ate it up. I loved it. So yeah, that's where it all came from.
So that you're also pretty well known for a game called Black Orchestra. Was that also kind of inspired by your original family ties and the Axis and Allies?
Yeah, kind of. I think I've always been sort of fascinated by how that all happened, and I've read a lot of books about that. And you know, I think I was watching some documentary one day, and I thought, this sort of sounds like a game here. And I didn't know exactly how that could kind of work out, but I'm not sure I'd ever really made a co-op game at that point. But yeah, I was able to make that, and I wasn't sure if anybody would even publish it, really, because I mean, it's, you know, the game about killing Hitler does not sound like something you would just kind of you know, sit down and have a great time with your kids playing or whatever. But apparently there is an audience, and so and we, you know, we really did try to make it historical as best we could, and or more than anything, I wanted people to have kind of the feeling that those conspirators might have had of like impending doom, but also, you know, perseverance, and I wanted it to be really hard and people to not really win too often, but I'm I'm not sure exactly how successful I was about that, because people do win, but they do say it is pretty hard. So I don't know.
Well, you definitely were successful with Citizens as well, in that same sense of you were saying getting that feeling of being in the city and how it would feel to be part of that. And while this isn't a civilization builder or historically based, I can really see where the influence of the different factions and kind of the strife. And you mentioned, you know, uplifting the civilization, but also that sense of impending doom that we tried to work in a little bit with Citizens.
Yeah, and I wanted to have right. I did want to have, you know, that sort of that story of people coming to your city and living their lives and then maybe dying, but then other people coming, or, you know, other people being born and living their lives. And it's sort of kind of a sort of a really zoomed in look on, or maybe zoomed out look on, like this whole process and speeding up the time of how much that would take. So yeah, that was definitely in my mind to do that, and I'm glad that that kind of comes through still.
So when did you start designing games exactly?
Well, I mean, I've been designing games since I was a kid. I would, you know, make these crazy maps on like poster board. You remember those things that you would get if there was a project or something, and I was always trying to, you know, hit up my parents to buy me more poster board. Not just something you have laying around. You had to make a special trip to the drugstore or something to get it. So I would make, you know, these little games and things. And it was just something I did. I don't know. Even as I got older, I still kind of continued. I didn't really think much about it, or even really think that it was an odd thing or whatever. It just was something that I did. And even in college, you know, I was making and constructing these little things with really no understanding of like where that was going, and really not much ambition about like, oh, one day I'm going to get this published or whatever. It wasn't a part of it for a long time. And until about, it was about 2007, I guess, I made a game called Revolution. And it was kind of the same deal, you know, I'm just kind of scrawling stuff out on paper, and by this time I'm using a computer and kind of able to print some stuff out that looked a little nicer. But some of my friends and my family, we sat around playing that, and it was really weird because after we got finished, they wanted to play it again, which had never happened, yeah, in any of my other games. And so I thought, well, okay, this is kind of weird. And so we actually kind of fell in love with it and started messing with it even more. And I thought, well, this is like a real thing. And so this is before Kickstarter and all that. So I guess it was maybe 2008 or something. I was following a few people, like blogs and stuff back then. And I think there was somebody talking about how they just sort of constructed their own stuff. And so I got some materials and I think I ended up making like 30 copies of this game, just like by hand, gluing paper onto cardboard and all kinds of stuff. It was crazy. Painting little cubes by hand. I mean, it was just ridiculous to even think about what happened. But I sold a couple of them on the internet, and one of them was bought by a guy at Steve Jackson Games, and which I had just barely heard of. And yeah, I just recently got into like Settlers of Catan and all that stuff. So I had gotten into modern board gaming, but only like, you know, just a little bit here, just those first couple of years. And so he bought one and called me up on the phone and said, hey, we played your game and it was cool, and we would like to make your game. We would like to publish it. And yeah, what do you say? Oh, of course, you know what? Yeah,
yes, sir. Steve Jackson, sir.
Right, sounds good to me. I had no idea what that would entail or what, you know. And they sent me this big contract or whatever, and I'm reading through it and whatever, you know. How could it, you know? Couldn't be too bad. So, but it turned out to be, you know, kind of a thing there for a while, and it did pretty well. And so I thought, well, I could probably do this again. So I made some more games, and that's kind of how it all started.
So definitely not something that you thought of as a trajectory for your life that was intentional. You didn't, you know, go to school for game design.
Right. Yeah. No, I didn't even think of it as any kind of like, you know, actual job or anything, which Not
Is it?
exactly. It actually isn't still a job, but it's still a side hustle.
Yeah.
But definitely a lot more of a thing than I thought it could be.
So what do you spend most of your days doing? What keeps you on the daytime job?
Well, most days I do substitute teaching, and then on the weekends I work at, well, not just the weekends, but during the week I work at my church as well. I'm the associate pastor at my church. So I guess maybe that's technically my main job, but it gives me a lot of latitude to fill in, various time doing other stuff. And so most of that's filled up with substitute teaching, but, depending on the day or whatever, might not be a whole lot going on. And so I get a lot of time to kind of sit and think about stuff and work on my computer. And so
Think about the Roman Empire and
yeah. So it actually works out pretty well. I end up with a lot of time to kind of work on stuff in between other stuff. So
well, that's awesome. Well, do you ever take some of your game designs to the schools? And
I have done some play testing here and there, and every once in a while sometimes there's game clubs that I go to, and sometimes there's a little bit of time for that sometimes.
It's such a useful tool for education sometimes, but I always wonder, how does that fit in with play testing? Are you do you play test as an educational tool? It's educational for you, for me, for the person testing it. Is it educational for the kids? I imagine it still is. It would be some critical thinking and learning how to give feedback, perhaps.
Yeah, my wife actually runs a homeschool co-op, which we homeschool as well. It's weird. I substitute in the public schools, but back home, my wife's teaching my kids. But anyway, so on Mondays, which is today, we're doing a homeschool co-op. And I have taught a class of game design several times in that. And so that's been kind of interesting to be able to do. And it's a good activity to have kids make games. Actually, I have done some teaching at Northern Kentucky University as well. So I do a game design class there, or have done in the past. I think I've got another one coming up in the spring. So I've done it for elementary kids, but also at the college level. And there's a lot of similarities, really, depending on their experience with games. But sometimes they get a little bit fancier. But it's a rewarding experience to be able to do that.
So speaking of great games that people love, what would you say are some of your personal favorite games?
Yeah, well, I've always been a really big fan of Dominion. And so that's kind of like, that's one of the reasons why Citizens has so many cards, is because I just love all the different combinations of cards that you can get. And even to this day, you'll put together some cards and play a game of Dominion, and something will happen during that game that you have never seen happen before.
Yeah.
And, that's amazing. That's amazing that there's any kind of game that's like that. And I think I heard Donald Vaccarino talk about that one time on a podcast, and he says that happens for him as well. He still plays Dominion all the time, and he'll see some brand new thing that he'd never seen before, which I think is just amazing.
Yeah, that's really part of the delight of games like Dominion and Citizens the Spark is how different the same cards that you've seen before. You understand how they work. You've seen them in play before, and some combination will suddenly happen that's just so unique and different. I mean, we were doing the math. What was it? It's like it's over 30 million possible combinations. There's no way you could possibly see them all. So even as the designer, sometimes something will happen that surprises you. One of the game developers here at Thunderworks, we were having a discussion about those recommended play style sets that we have in the rule book that tell you a few of the different ways that you can formulate your game so that it can be more tactical, or a fast running game, or a higher interaction, lower interaction, and discussing some of the other combinations that didn't make the cut into that rule book, including ones where things just aren't going to play nicely together, where it's going to be a lot of push and pull that could be very satisfying, or very aggressive, or very stalematey. There's different combinations that can just happen unexpectedly, and I think that's part of the joy. That's the real delight. I remember having a game that I played personally, where suddenly we were popping off 60, 70, 80 points per player per turn. Every score's over 300. That's
it can go crazy sometimes.
Yeah, it feels like you broke it, but in a really great way. That's so satisfying.
Well, that's one of my design aesthetics too. Is I like every card to feel like it's broken. So. Because if every card is, and maybe I heard this from Carl Chodik or somebody, if every card's broken, then it's balanced, right?
Yes.
I like games like that, and I have kind of some of that, peeking in here and there. The other thing about Citizens too is not only does it have so many different combinations of cards for your game, but even if you play with the exact same combination, it all depends on when they come out. It's like that deck is getting shuffled up, and you might be waiting for this one card to come in. They might all be at the bottom or something, and that really changes the character of the game, even if you use the exact same setup.
That's a really good point. Yeah. And which one becomes kind of the star of the game can really depend on when they're coming up and what you have. So in a typical game, you're first dealt 4 citizens to start, and you keep 2 of them to kind of found your city and roll things along. So even what you start with in those 4 cards and 2 that you keep can make a big difference, even in the same set, as to how the first rounds are going to go, and what kind of strategy people latch onto early, and what cards come out into the assembly. That's a really good point. I need to play more of the same game in a row. I rarely do that because I crave that fun distinction every time of just like, all right, now let's mix them up and see what other thing we can have happen. Maybe we can make a deck where nothing works together intentionally, like none of this symbol that this guy works off of or something. I love that. I think it's an absolute blast.
I remember those games of Dominion where you have the witch, and it's like everybody's getting these curses every time, and it just like all just grinds to a halt, and you're just like scrabbling over like getting at least 5 or 6 points, and that would be enough to win the game if you could just get that many. I always thought those games were kind of fun.
Yeah, I love that. It's like
in a weird kind of way. It was like backwards or something.
Yeah, I mean, if that was a game that if the game played like that all the time, it would be frustrating. But when it's a unique experience that comes as a surprise out of something that you already have enjoyed different flavors of, it's just so fun. It's like the Jelly Belly bag of beans.
You
never know which flavor, except it depends how you feel about that black licorice bean, but it's still more exciting in there.
Hey, it's an experience, right?
Anyway. Well, I know that you have an event that you have to get to. I'm really glad you were able to squeeze in a few minutes for us this morning. Sorry, the timing is really tight for you today. But I did want to open up the floor if there are any. I know there's a couple people watching live. If anybody has any specific questions as we're wrapping up, please do feel free to comment, and we will do our best to get in these last minutes. But I guess the last questions I had for you really were, like what makes you most excited about being a game designer? What kind of keeps you going in this industry?
Well, it's kind of the same thing we've been talking about, really. I just like to see new things, and so some people are kind of surprised by like how many different kinds of games that I've made. Like I've made some larger kind of games, I've made some really small card games, and several things in between, because I just like to see kind of a variety of things. I like to be surprised, and so it's just just the curiosity of, well, what about if we did this, or what about this, or just taking some little small idea and try to flesh it out, or some kind of interesting situation and then figure out some mechanisms that go with it. I just think that's just endlessly fun, and so like I said, I would probably do it whether people paid me or not, just because I just sort of have to do it. It's just so fascinating to me. I remember reading over your list of questions or whatever, and one of them was like, "Oh, what game would you take on a desert island if it was just you or whatever?" And I think probably I would just take like a deck of cards just so that I could keep making new games out of them. I think that's probably what I would do.
just a standard poker deck, right?
Yeah, maybe. something like that.
That is an unexpected answer that I definitely had not prepared for. So at least now I know what you would take if it was you alone on a desert island. What would you take if there were a group of people with you on that desert island?
I mean, probably the Dominion would be pretty high up there. But I also like some of those longer games too. Like I play Eclipse some. I really like that, where it's like kind of this big 4X kind of thing, Axis and Allies and stuff like that. Sometimes I like that. I don't have time for those games as much anymore, but I really do enjoy them. You know, just because again, you never know exactly what's going to happen, and just because of how epic they are, it's always a good experience.
Awesome. Well, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us today and giving us a talk about Citizens of Spark. Before you go, I'm sure you've seen some of the pictures and so forth, but I don't know if you've physically seen the inside on camera a little bit of some of what we've got in here. This was that list we were talking about of
right.
recommended sets, and I was really surprised to see how many people were talking about that in their preview videos. These beautiful Spark tokens. One of the things that people have been absolutely the most excited about is this.
Right.
It's so satisfying. And, I didn't expect this to be the star of the show for so many people, but apparently it is. Oh, hey, look, I pulled that one.
Yeah, I really wish I'd have had that when I was playtesting, because I was having to sort them out every time, and I didn't think to.
Yeah, the first number of games I played were definitely not with this quality version, and having had it over the weekend to play with, it's a lot easier than putting them back in little card sleeve packets. But we no longer have the option of just throwing all the card packets on the table and squishing them around like this to make the decisions. So that randomizer deck is a much superior option, I guess. It's much more organized, but well, thank you for coming out today. I will let you get to your next destination, but we're really excited to be seeing Citizens of the Spark come to life. A big thank you to everyone who's already backed it so far, and to those who are still thinking about it. We hope you'll head over, and you're going to get a great price on this truly fantastic game. I think you guys are going to love it. And Philip duBarry, an amazing designer, so you know it's going to be good. All right, thanks for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of your day, everybody.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.